We're going to begin Parshas Tetzaveh. So now this Chumash is page 532. The Gutnik one, or Exodus chapter 20, chapter 28, 27, chapter 27, verse 20. This is the name of the Parsha this week is Tetzaveh. Tetzaveh means to command. We'll talk a little bit about that later. But what is interesting about this Parsha is the elephant in the room, or the elephant that's not in the room, and that is what our rabbis point out, that this Parsha of Tetzaveh is the only portion from when Moses is born until the book of Deuteronomy that his name is not mentioned in the Parsha. So this is the glaring omission of this week's Parsha, which begs for an explanation. Why is Moshe Rabbeinu's name not mentioned in this week's Parsha? Very disturbing. Simple question, right? Simple question has a simple answer, or maybe it's not such a simple answer. In order to understand why Moshe Rabbeinu's name is not mentioned in this week's Parsha, for that we have to go to next week's Parsha. We have to address and mention and recall and learn the story of the sin of the golden calf. But not so much the sin of the golden calf, but how atonement for this sin was effectuated. Last week we actually touched upon this. Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses was on top of the mountain. He comes down because God sends him down and says, your people have sinned, go down. So he sees, when he comes down, he smashes the tablets, and then he goes and he tries to make order. And Hashem tells Moshe Rabbeinu basically that he wants to destroy the Jewish people, the Jewish people, and start a new nation from Moshe Rabbeinu. And Moshe Rabbeinu now has to defend, so to speak, the Jewish people. So he beseeches God, please have mercy on them, forgive the people. And he says, if you look in Exodus chapter 32, verse 32, interesting, because 32 we know in Hebrew is lev, which means a heart. So in the heart of Exodus chapter 32, in the heart of the heart, which is verse 32, chapter 32, verse 32, there's definitely some serious depth and meaning to that. So Moshe Rabbeinu says as follows. Chapter 32 in the Gutnik Chumash, it's on page 570, towards the bottom of page 570. Moshe Rabbeinu says like this: Va'ata now, im tiso chatosom, if you are able to hold up their sin. Vim ayin, but if not, mechenin amesifrecha asher kasafta, erase me from the book which you have written. Says Rashi, what does it mean? Rashi says you gotta, it's short, it's written shorthanded. Now, if you can hold their sin, so that's great. So then I'm not saying anything. If you're able to hold their sin, God, that's fantastic. But if not, if you can't hold on to their sin, then erase me from the book which you have written. Since Moshe Rabbeinu said this, the rule is the curse of a scholar, even if the curse is dependent on something else happening, and that something else doesn't happen, nevertheless, the fact that a wise tzaddik gave the curse, it has some a grasp in this universe. It affects the world to some degree. So in our case, since Moshe Rabbeinu cursed, and he said, erase my name from your Torah. Yes, it's true. He said it only if God could not or would not forgive them for their sin. But since those words came out of his mouth, so it had some type of effectuation in this world. And that's why from one portion, his name was erased. Indeed, from one portion, from our portion, the Tetzaveh, his name, the name of Moshe, is not found in the Parsha of this week. So that's the background to why his name is not mentioned. Now, let's explore this. Let's explore this. What does it mean? What did Moses mean when he said, if not, erase me from the book which you have written? What do these words mean? So there are actually two different explanations on what these words mean. I just gave you one. Moshe Rabbeinu said, erase me from the book which you have written, meaning the Torah, right? But there's another explanation. We're going to focus, the main part of the class is going to discuss the first one, but there's another one, which perhaps from a certain angle makes more sense. And this is the explanation of Rashi's grandson, the Rashbam, and the Ramban Nachmanides as well. And they write as follows. He writes as follows. What does it mean, erase me from the book which you have written? This refers to the book of life. Moshe Rabbeinu is telling God, on Rosh Hashanah, you've written a book of life. You've put me in the book of life. Before you, there is a book of life. And in that book of life, my name is written. You want to now go and kill. You want to now go and abolish these people. So I'm telling you, either forgive them for their sin, and if not, take my name out of the book of life. In other words, take my life instead of their life. I'm telling you, God, if you need life, if that's what the punishment needs to be, so then take my life. Don't take their life. Leave them be. Moshe Rabbeinu is ready to sacrifice his own life for the sake of the Jewish people. And this makes a lot of sense, because what compels these commentators to learn this way is because what does it mean? Either forgive them or erase me from your Torah. How's that going to help? What does that help anybody? So if Moshe Rabbeinu's name is not mentioned in Torah, now what? Which we'll discuss later. But this explanation is an explanation of Jewish leadership, of Moshe Rabbeinu being ready to give up his life for the sake of the Jewish people, to take one for the team. And this is many Jewish leaders post Moshe Rabbeinu, and lahavdil, perhaps even non-Jewish leaders also were ready to give up their life and gave up their life so that their community should be spared. And we find this in the book of Isaiah, a similar idea in the book of Isaiah, in chapter 53. This is towards the end of the book of Isaiah, where Isaiah writes the following words in chapter 53, verse 5. He writes, V'hu mechoilel mipeshoenu miduko me'avoneseinu musar shleimeinu olav chaburase nirpo lonu. He was pained because of our rebellious sins and oppressed through our wounds. No, I'm sorry, I skipped the line. And oppressed through our iniquities. The chastisement upon him was for our benefit, and through his wounds we were healed. So you see, this is Jewish leadership that Isaiah is talking about. The ultimate Jewish leader, Mashiach. What's Mashiach? Someone who is going to take the pain for the Jewish people. He's going to bear all the wounds. He's going to be oppressed. Why? Because of our sins. And through him, we, the Jewish nation, will be healed. So you see over here, Moshe Rabbeinu, in a similar way, God says, I want to kill the people. Moshe Rabbeinu says, no, don't kill them. Take me from your book of life. Makes sense. Now let's understand Rashi. Rashi says that it means the entire Torah. When Moshe Rabbeinu says to erase my name from your book, he didn't mean the book of life. That's not what he was talking about. He was talking about from your entire Torah, says Rashi, Mikol HaTorah Kula, from your entire Torah. That's what Moses said. And as I said, that's why Moshe Rabbeinu's name is not mentioned in this week's Parsha, right? Because of this, the Moshe Rabbeinu said, erase my name from your Torah. That's why his name is not mentioned in this week's Parsha. Question. Why this week's Parsha? This week's Parsha, we didn't even yet read about the story of the golden calf. We only read about this whole episode next week. So why would this week's Parsha be chosen as the one not to have Moshe Rabbeinu's name? There must be a thematic connection. The Parsha of Tetzaveh must have some connection to this idea of Moshe Rabbeinu's name not being mentioned in the Torah in this week's Parsha. And we have to understand that we're going to try to explore what is that connection between hiding his name and this week's Parsha specifically. The expression goes, silence is deafening. Sometimes when someone is quiet, they actually are making a louder statement than if they would have actually used words. We find this many times in life. Their silence was deafening. We find this, unfortunately, when it comes to Israel. Many of the people in the world who, October 7th, when the Jewish people are attacked, they don't say anything. And it's very appropriate to say on them that their silence is deafening. We see very well where you stand and what you think of whatever it was that happened and befell the Jewish people. You obviously don't care. But you found your voice when Israel began to retaliate, of course. That was parenthetically that I mentioned that. But the fact that Moshe Rabbeinu's name is not mentioned in the Parsha this week, the problem is that what is the Parsha opening words? Ve'ata tetzaveh b'nei Yisrael. And you shall command the Jewish people. Who's you? Who's the you that we're talking about? Who should command the Jewish people? V'yichru elecha shemen zayis, and they should bring to you pure olive oil. Kosis lamoyer, crushed in order to illuminate. Lahalis nertome, to give up a flame, an eternal flame. Who are we talking about over here? Who is God speaking to in this week's Parsha? He's speaking to none other than Moshe Rabbeinu. You guessed it. So we don't call him by name like the rest of the Torah. God spoke to Moses saying, no, God says, and you shall command the... Well, he's getting a lot of attention. For trying to ignore him for a week, you're giving him more attention by ignoring him. We're trying too hard to hide his name, that you end up giving him more attention than he would have had his name been in there. So if the whole purpose of this thing was to somehow ignore Moshe Rabbeinu, to hide Moshe Rabbeinu, to hide his presence for a week in order that his curse, so quote-unquote curse, should have some bearing and have some holding in this world, in the Torah, it's sort of counterproductive. We're sort of giving him much more attention this way, in the word of Ve'ata Tetzaveh. When we say, and you, the mystics explain that a person's name is very intimate to who they are. It's a very personal thing, a person's name. So this explains and uses the parable many times that when someone faints, we call them by their name. And you see this also in real life many times on the battlefield when someone is wounded and slipping out of consciousness, God forbid, or almost, people call them by their name to try to keep them. We call them by their name. We keep on calling them constantly by their name, because the name touches a very deep part of the soul. But notwithstanding this fact that a name does touch the very deep part of the soul, at the end of the day, a name is a definition. And it can only reach a certain defined space of your core. When we use the terminology of Ve'ata and you, we're referring to you at your core, at your essence, that transcends any name, that transcends any type of definition. We don't have any other way of reaching it other than saying you. So instead of ignoring Moshe Rabbeinu in the Parsha by just calling him Moshe, and he would pass on, we call him you, as if we're transcending, we're going to an even deeper level of Moshe Rabbeinu in this week's Parsha. So this whole exercise needs to be understood. How do we make sense of this whole idea over here? Everyone understand up until this point? Are the questions understood? Yeah. Everyone online understand it too?
Think so.
Think so. Okay. I guess they're speaking for everybody online. They could speak up if they want. Okay. So in order to understand this, we have to get to understanding what Moshe Rabbeinu was trying to accomplish. With his words, erase me from your Torah. How is that going to help, as we asked? How does that, what was his logic? What's the logic in the argument? God says, you guys have sinned, so I'm going to punish you. Moshe says, either forgive them, and if not, what's my threat? How am I going to try to achieve atonement for them? By saying, erase me from your Torah. Okay, I'll erase you from my Torah.
It's a punishment.
Huh?
It's a punishment.
It's a punishment to who?
To Moses.
So it's going to be a punishment. So Moses was saying don't kill them. If you have to kill them, so then punish me. So he was offering. See that it's for this reason, like I said before. That's why the other commentators say that he was referring to the book of life, because it makes sense. Don't take their life, take my life. But it doesn't really make sense to tell somebody, don't take their life, take my $100. It doesn't make sense. In other words, what he was offering was less of value than what God needed over here. Because God was saying they need to have a punishment of death because this is what's warranted in such a situation. And you're coming back and telling me about a book. Take my name out of your book. That's why the other commentators go the other way. But Rashi also has this problem, and nevertheless, Rashi still says what he says, that he's referring to the book of Torah. Yeah.
You do that to them. I don't want to have anything to do with it. I'm out of it.
Okay, good. And how did you help? Good. I agree with you. Maybe he was saying that. That's how we learn. But how would you help that way? You're trying to be helpful.
I did everything I can. And if you're going to punish them, I don't want to be part of it.
Okay. So you're no, 100%. I agree with you. We would many times apply that logic. You know, if you're gonna do this, then take my name off of it, right? But he wasn't saying take my name really. He was saying almost like take my name off of everything else. And if I take your name off of everything else, is that going to help them? No. So nothing would help. So if nothing's going to help, so then it was just about a selfish thing about him. If he's going to be able to what? To prove himself to who? In other words, yeah, maybe we sometimes we say that, but that's because we didn't think it through all the way. We can't apply that to Moshe Rabbeinu, some flimsy logic when he's trying to defend the Jewish people. We can say that we're worried about what someone else is going to do. But over here, Moshe Rabbeinu is talking to God, trying to effectuate salvation for the Jewish people. You're not helping. So either help them, or if not, I'm going to clean my hands from the story. All right, go clean your hands from the story. You didn't do anything. All right? So let's understand for a moment over here. Let's take a moment and realize if one of us make the argument that Moshe Rabbeinu made, imagine the story happened with one of us, and we'd make this argument. How significant would that be? Simply, how significant would it be if there was an issue, serious issue that happened, and God comes to you and says, this is what happened to this person, this is what they did to me, and I want you to, I'm just letting you know, and you come back to God and you say, God, this is not good. You can't do that to them. No, you can't do that. If you do this to them, take my name out of your Torah. All right. I don't even know if your name is in there, But if your name isn't there, in other words, I could take your name out. It's not really significant, too significant for us to make such an argument. Why is it so significant for Moshe Rabbeinu? Because Moshe Rabbeinu, he had a soul connection to the Torah. The Torah was one with Moses. Moses and the Torah are one to the point that the Torah is called Torah's Moshe, the Torah of Moses. When you come up in the world, who discovered electricity? Who discovered nuclear power? Who discovered the laws of gravity? Who discovered X? Who discovered Y? Everything has a name. This person discovered this, and forever is remembered as the person to discover this. This person discovered that, and forever is remembered as the person that discovered that. So forever, when you're talking about this subject, you're always talking about the subject that is really the child of Mr. or Madam, whoever, fill in the blank. When we talk about Torah, we're talking about the book of Moses, the 5 books of Moses. This is Moses. This is what he's remembered for. This is who he is. For Moses to come along and say, take me out of your Torah, is Moses saying, divorce me from something that I am connected with at my core. I have a soul bond to this. This is my book. I, so to speak, discovered this. This is my reality. And I'm saying, divorce me from it. I don't want it. Who is he saying this for? He's saying this on behalf of who? Not all the Jewish people. He's saying it on behalf of the sinners of the Jewish people. You mean to tell me that you're ready to cut off ties from the Torah because 3,000 Jews served a golden calf? I mean, they couldn't care about the Torah. Obviously, they made the golden calf. The Torah is not of value to them, really. So why are you ready to do this? Why, Moshe Rabbeinu, why are you ready to do this? And the answer is, that the question is really framed in the wrong way. Because I framed the question in the way like there is God, Moses, and the Jewish people. God wants to punish a few thousand Jews or the whole Jewish community. And Moshe Rabbeinu is coming and saying, save the Jewish people, and how I'm ready to give up my essence, my history. Forever, I'm ready to give it all up. Don't do something to them. So the question is, well, why are you ready to do it for these people? They don't even care about what you're teaching them. But it's framed in the wrong way, because the truth of the matter is that Rashi teaches us in the book of Numbers, chapter 21, verse 21. So we had Exodus 32, 32. Now we have Numbers 21, 21. Chaf Aleph, Chaf Aleph. Rashi says, Moshe hu Yisrael v'Yisrael heim Moshe. Moses is Israel, and Israel are Moses. Moses is Israel, Israel is Moses. They cannot be separated. In other words, that the connection that Moses has with the Jewish people is not a connection of a leader that's been democratically elected, and now he represents everybody. It's not even a connection of a king, some monarch who represents all of his subjects. Moses is, by his soul, connected with every Jew, and every Jew at our core is connected to Moses. So when the Jewish people sinned, as we mentioned last week, when we spoke about the spiritual contamination that was brought into the world, and therefore it affected Moses also. When a Jew goes down, they schlep Moses with them. When God wants to punish the Jewish person with annihilation, a piece of Moses is being punished with annihilation. That's the way Moshe feels. It's not some other person who I have to advocate for now. I'm going to be a good lawyer. I'm going to be a good defendant. I'm going to be a best friend. I'm going to say, I'm good friends with you, and I'm also good friends with you. You did something wrong. You're the one that has power to say innocent or guilty. I know both of them. I say, do me a favor. Razan, I love her. She's amazing. She just made a mistake. I love you. Trust me, it's on my shoulders. Just forgive her, because I'm such a good friend, right? That's what Moshe Rabbeinu is doing over here. He's saying, you should know that me and Razan are one. Whatever happens to Razan happens to me. Whatever happens to you happens to Razan. Yisrael hey Moshe who Yisrael Yisrael hey Moshe. So now we have two, if you will, soul bonds for Moshe Rabbeinu over here. On the one hand, Moses is connected with Torah in the deepest way, that it's called the 5 books of Moses, and this is what Moses is all about. He's all about Torah. That's Moses' contribution to the universe. The Torah is his contribution that will forever be credited to Moshe Rabbeinu. On the other hand, Moshe Rabbeinu is one with the Jewish people. So this works great until it doesn't. What happens when there's a clash? What happens when the Jewish people who are supposed to be listening to the Torah disobey? So now you have to choose one. Do I side with the Jew, with the sinner, or do I side with the Torah? Torah says they're a sinner, they need to be punished. That's the law. The law was given down. It's my teaching, right? Moshe Rabbeinu says, I taught it. The Jewish people know it. You cannot have any other gods. And if you do have other gods, well, that's capital crime, capital punishment. So if you want to know what you're supposed to do, what does a Jew say? In any situation, if I'm questioned, what am I supposed to do? Now the answer is, let's give a look in Torah and see what Torah says. So I give a look in Torah, and Torah says the Jew has to be put down. But the Jew is me. You're part of me. I'm part of you. What happens now? Who do I side with? So for that, we have to go and look at God. The answer to this question is going to be found with God himself. The Zohar tells us, the Torah, Israel, the Torah, and God are all one. In other words, we just frame the question as if this applies to Moshe Rabbeinu. But the same thing applies to God in even a deeper way, because it's really God's Torah. It's all about God's Torah. And the Zohar says that the Jewish people are one with God. So now, God, what do you do in such a situation? What does God do in such a situation? This is a question that God has to deal with on a constant basis. Every time a Jew doesn't listen, every time a Jew disobeys, Torah says, God says, this is what's going to happen. On the other hand, you're my people. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. So this is a question that goes on all the time. But when pressed, our rabbis tell us, Yisrael kodmu laTorah. The Jewish people take precedence to the Torah. The Jewish people come before Torah. The bond between God and the Jewish people is deeper, is higher than the connection that God has with Torah. Therefore, because this is the way by God, the same thing applies to every leader of the Jewish people. What does a Jewish leader do? When we say a Jewish leader, we don't mean a community activist. That's not what we're talking about over here. There are people that represent the Jewish people in today in America, in politics, and heads of organizations, and they do all great work. That's not what we're talking about Jewish leadership. We're talking about Mordechai. We're talking about Daniel. We're talking about David. We're talking about people who represented the Jewish people, people who led the Jewish people. What are they known for? What do they do all their time? What did the Rebbe spend most of his day doing? The answer is studying Torah. Most of the day, these people they spend their day studying Torah. King David would wake up At midnight, some say. And he would begin to sing the praises of Hashem until sunrise. And then he would daven. On the other hand, he was all about the Jewish people. But what takes precedence? They learn from Hashem that the Jewish people take precedence even over Torah. Now we can understand what Moshe Rabbeinu was trying to accomplish. Now we can understand the brilliance. Let's understand the brilliance. Moshe Rabbeinu tells God as follows. God like this. Im tiso chatosam. If you could hold their sin, that's great. Fantastic. If you could find forgiveness, if you could forgive them, that's amazing. Vim ayin, but if you can't, if not, now why wouldn't God forgive the Jewish people? Let's understand. What would prevent God from giving a pass to the Jewish people? The answer is the only thing that would stand in the way between the Jewish people and full forgiveness is the Torah. The law of the Torah is what would prevent God from letting the Jewish people walk free. Because Torah says, no, you can't do that. This is the rule. So Moses says like this, if you could forgive them, that's great. Vim ayin, but not, if you can't do it, because why wouldn't you be able to do it? Because, fill in the blank, because Torah would prevent you from doing it. So then, erase me from your Torah. I am going to show you that these people are more valuable to me than Torah is. I'm going to highlight, I'm going to stress, I'm going to bring to the fore where my true inner soul lies if I have to choose between the two. What's that going to help? Why am I doing this? Says Moses. In other words, God, you're going to look at me. Why would Moses do this? Oh, you know why Moses is doing this? Where did he learn this from? Where did he get this idea from? From God. So that's going to affect by God the same thing. It's going to elicit from God the same reaction. I'm going to show you that the Jewish people transcend the Torah, which in turn is going to cause that you, God, should feel the same way about the Jewish people in this situation. Which, what will happen then? If the Torah is quieted, so to speak, kaviyachol for a moment, now God forgives the Jewish people. Now the Jewish people can get back to Torah. This is what Rashi explains. This is how we can understand Moshe Rabbeinu's logic, what he was trying to accomplish. He was trying to accomplish and effectuate this reaction from God. It was his visceral reaction. If you could do it, that's great. Again, who is he referring to specifically? The sinners of the Jewish people. The non-sinners of the Jewish people didn't need this because Torah would never prevent them from being forgiven. It was specifically these people. And who had to do it? Moshe Rabbeinu. Because he had to show, Moshe Rabbeinu has to show where his true love lies. And there's a fascinating thing over here. Rashi actually says, right after he says the words, to erase my name from your Torah, Rashi says something else. I failed to mention it earlier, but we'll say it now. Rashi says like this. Shelo yomeru alai, they shouldn't say on me, Shelo hayisi kedai levakesh leim racham, that I wasn't worthy enough to ask for mercy on them. Erase me from your whole Torah, so that they shouldn't say about me that I wasn't worthy enough to ask for mercy on them. So seemingly, when you read it quickly, it seems to be what you were saying, right? I'm worried about what someone else is going to think. So don't take my name out of the story. You want to do it? If I can't stop you from doing it, you're going to do it anyways. Make sure my name is not there. Why do I care if my name is there? I don't want someone who reads the story to think that I was associated with it. So seemingly, but as I said before, it doesn't really make sense because Moshe Rabbeinu's worried about this? You care really about what someone else is going to think? That's what's bothering you, Moshe Rabbeinu? And when you read the verse, seemingly his claim, his logic, what he's pressing for is for forgiveness. He's not trying to press for something else other than forgiveness. It doesn't come across as he's trying to prevent a third party from having some type of claim on him that he didn't do a good job. That's a very far-fetched thing to say that he was worried about that. From the simple, straight-up translation, it's all about atonement. He's trying to bring about atonement, and it doesn't bring atonement. This, seemingly. But now we could understand with the explanation that we gave now, we can understand this very well. What was Moshe Rabbeinu saying over here? What was his concern? What was bothering Moshe Rabbeinu? The answer is, what do we got? What's the answer? What would happen if Moshe Rabbeinu didn't bring about? What would happen if Moshe Rabbeinu did not bring about this of forgiveness for the Jewish people?
It'd be gone, that's it. No second chance,
And then, correct. And then what would the new generation of Jews, what would the new generation of Jews think? In other words, what would be in their mind? History. What was the history? What's our history? Let's go back. How did this happen? What would the answer be in their mind? What would they think? They would think that Moshe Rabbeinu treated Torah as more important than his fellow Jew. They shouldn't say, the future people shouldn't say, Moshe Rabbeinu was worried. No one should ever come along and think that the Torah is more important than a Jew. Parenthetically, as I said once before, if someone, God forbid, is carrying the Torah scroll in shul, let's say, God forbid, a person is carrying the Torah in shul, right? And they fall, they trip on the floor, holding the Torah, God forbid. And now you have lying on the floor a person and a Torah scroll.
Which one do you pick up first?
Who do you pick up first? And the answer is, you pick up the person first. You pick up the person first. Moshe Rabbeinu, we have a rule. The rule goes like this: V'ahavta l'reacha kamoicha. Right? What does v'ahavta l'reacha kamoicha mean? Love your fellow as you love yourself. Right? Right? That's what kamoicha means, as you love yourself. Moshe Rabbeinu could say, what's my great love? My great love is Torah. Right? I have to love you as much as I'd be ready to love myself. For myself, I would never give up my Torah. Right? So I wouldn't give up my Torah for you. I'm not obligated to give up my Torah for you either. You can make that claim. I love you, but I love you as much as I love me. I wouldn't do that for myself. So I'm not going to be ready to do it for you. But what does Moshe Rabbeinu say? Moshe Rabbeinu says no. Kamoicha, to love your fellow as you love yourself, is not good enough for a Jewish leader. That's not what a Jewish leader is. A Jewish leader says you have to love your fellow until the end, even more than you love yourself. No Jew should ever think, ever in the history, in the future of the Jewish people, no Jew should ever think that I wasn't ready to give up the Torah. I wasn't ready to give up my love, my contribution to the world on behalf of the Jewish people. This is something which is fascinating. How does this play out in the Parsha? Let's get back to, we had a question, why this week's Parsha? So this is the story. Now that we have this information, how does it apply to the Parsha this week? So what are we talking about in the Parsha this week? Because I said before, Va'ata and you is a level that transcends a person's name. is a very interesting, very, very interesting idea. The idea goes like this. The soul has 5 names. Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Chaya, and Yechida. And the Ramban, Nachmanides, and the Zohar say that the entire Torah, from the first word of Bereshis till the last word of Yisro, every word in the Torah is actually Shemoisim Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. They're all named, it's all names of God. Now you don't see it. We think we're reading a word and he spoke and they were in Egypt and Paro. We can't see it. But if you had the right glasses on, you would be able to see how every word of the Torah is a name of God. It's a reference to God. It's a level of God. So the whole Torah is really one big book of names of God. The word tetzaveh, commandment, like a word mitzvah, comes from the word safsa v'chibur. Safsa v'chibur means to make a connection between 2 things. What is every mitzvah? Every mitzvah is an opportunity to connect with God. God gave us this mitzvah as an opportunity to connect with Him. Who can effectuate the deepest bonding between the Jewish people and God? Who can bring about that ultimate, transcendent connection, unity, oneness between God and the Jewish people? Only Moshe Rabbeinu can do it. That's this week's parsha. Ve'ata, and you, not your name, because your name wouldn't be able to elicit, it wouldn't be able to bring out such a powerful idea. It would only be able to relate to a name of God, a name of me, a name of my soul connects with a name of God. That's Torah. Torah is all about names of God. Levels, different levels of God. But va'ata, and you, without any name or definition, you, tetzaves b'nei Yisrael, you can command, aka you can connect the Jewish people. Only this way can there be such a connection. And they have to bring to you the olive oil in order to illuminate. Why to Moses? Moses didn't light the menorah. Aaron lit the menorah. And the explanation is because Aaron on his own can only take people that are fit to be illuminators. Aaron was great at bringing about illumination. But what can be illuminated? Who can be an illuminator? Only someone who's fit for it. If you're unfit for it, if you're not ready for it, if this is not something that you've been trained for, or it's something which you disengage with, it's something which you disobey, it's something which you mock and laugh, well, then Aaron says, I'm sorry, you can't become an illuminator. You don't fit the bill. However, God says, I don't want Aaron, the oil, to be brought to Aaron on his own. I want it to be brought to you, Moshe. And Moshe, you give it to Aaron. This way, every Jew, because Moshe brings about the connection between every Jew and Almighty God in a way that transcends Torah. So even someone who is a sinner of the Jewish people, even though you may have sinned, and you may have sinned the grave sin of the golden calf, which brought about destruction for the world, which brought about a contamination for the world, and we are still suffering from it till this very day. Nevertheless, Yisrael, who you're still a Jew. And you can still be an illuminator in this world. But you got to go through Moses. If you're not traveling that path, because only Moshe Rabbeinu can bring this idea out. He's the one that has the power. He's the one that lives. He's the embodiment of this idea. Aaron doesn't have that. So Moshe, you take the oil and bring it to Aaron, and Aaron will take it to the menorah and light it up. This is the depth of this week's parsha and the connection. Now we see very clearly. Because this whole idea is expressed nowhere greater than the story of Moshe Rabbeinu asking God for the forgiveness of the Jewish people after the sin of the golden calf. Even though they were sinners, even though they didn't listen, even though they heard it from themselves with their own ears from Mount Sinai, don't have any other gods. Moshe said, you're right. I don't have no claims that they didn't. My only thing that I can offer is That's all true according to Torah. But there's a connection which goes even beyond and deeper and higher than that. That we don't need Torah in order to be connected to Almighty God. We're born connected. There's different types of relationships in life. There's husband and wife. Husband and wife is a great relationship. Healthy, I should say. A healthy marriage is a great relationship. But why do two people that were strangers ever decide to get married? There has to be a reason for it. There has to be a reason for it. If there would be no reason, you wouldn't be interested. In other words, there's something drawing me to you. There's a reason why I want you. You compliment me. You give me something. You bring out of me something, whatever it is. But there has to be something there. If there's no attraction, if I don't feel like then I'm not interested in you. So when it works, it's amazing because we both feed off of each other's good energy. And we went from being two separate, unique individuals to becoming one soul. We're bound together now in a love that can't be found anywhere else. It's a union, it's a bonding that just takes the two and makes it one. We were two half souls merging back together. Now we feel like this is where we belong. This is who we really are. That's the way a healthy marriage is. But then there's a relationship between a parent and a child. And the relation between a parent and a child is not based off of something that you give me or you don't give me. It's not about, oh, you make me feel good and that's why I'm your father and that's why I'm your mother. That's not the way it works. The relation between a parent and a child is one which goes deeper, higher, and transcends any type of behavior. Even when you misbehave, I'm still your parent. Even when you misbehave, I still love you. And because I love you, I have to discipline you. I have to train you. I have to tell you what you're doing is wrong so you can become a mensch. And even if you still don't listen to me, chas v'shalom, even if, God forbid, one has a rebellious child, it's still my child. And it's never taken away from me that it's my child. Because the relationship didn't come about through any action. It's not like, oh, I saw you, I liked you, and that's why I took you. That's what I did for my spouse, not for my child. My child is mine because it's part of me. My child is forever. A piece of me lives in my child. A piece of my soul lives in my child. Every one of us, a piece of our parents live on within us. Regardless how we obey or disobey the way they taught us. It's not an excuse not to listen to them. On the contrary. Because of this should drive us to want to listen. But if God forbid we didn't, Moshe Rabbeinu says the Jewish people, the connection with the Jewish people and God is not a Torah exclusive connection. The Torah connection is a connection between spouses. God said, I love you. I see you. I'm attracted to you. You people are going to be my people, be illuminators in this world. Are you going to be a Or LaGoyim? And the Jewish people said, God, that's amazing. We love you. Please, let's get married. Each side said, let's get married. And we made the wedding. We were engaged and we had the whole big fancy engagement party, and a lot of good stuff happened. There was fireworks and there was thunder and lightning. It was all good stuff. That's one type of relationship that we have with God. That's a reality. And if we break that, then there's consequences. When there's an unfaithful partner, there's consequences. In the marriage, it can break down a relationship. It can sever the bond of this relationship. Moshe Rabbeinu says you're right. The Jewish people have cut ties, and really one spouse should divorce the other spouse. You're right. However, the Jewish people are also your child. You can't divorce your child. You can never divorce a child. You're gonna have to talk to them, maybe. You could be in an argument with them. That happens. But you can't divorce them. So God, if you're gonna go about the Torah route, if that's the way you want to have focus on that side of the relationship, so then I'm out. What do you mean I'm out? It means that I am siding with my child. I'm going to side with the Jewish people are my child. I learned from you. They're my child. And that's not something that could ever be severed. So you can't do it. That brings about from Hashem that same reaction, which enables us to get back to Torah and to follow and to highlight and to strengthen and bolster that side of the relationship as well. The other side, the spousal side. I use this only as analogies, but that's the idea, to give us some imagery to put it into proper focus for us to understand. And this is what Moshe Rabbeinu is in this week's parasha. If you want to be an illuminator, there's no person who can't be an illuminator in this world. There's no Jew, from the most religious to the most irreligious, who is excluded from this, from being a light on to the nations. Every person can do it. Everyone is part of the Jewish people. Everyone is a child to Hashem. But if you go through Aaron only brings people that are ready for it. People that are unfit for Aaron says, I don't have what it takes. That's the way it would have been. That's why God says, Moshe, you bring it to Aaron. You bring every Jew to Aaron. Now when Aaron sees another Jew, he says every Jew can be an illuminator. Now Aaron is able to work with every single Jewish person and bring out the great potential that we each have as individuals. That special gift that Hashem gave to us, Aaron is able to extract it from us, to bring it as something which can benefit the entire universe, not something which is sitting inside of us somewhere dormant, or even that we are taking pleasure from in our own personal life. But Aaron says it has to become now something that gives warmth and light to the rest of the world as well. Said Moshe Rabbeinu, make sure nobody ever thinks otherwise. No Jew should ever think that there's only one side to this relationship. There has to be further. And we have to learn from Moshe Rabbeinu in our daily life as well. We have to be ready to go and sacrifice even beyond what we do for ourselves. That's right, as strange as it sounds. Who's the only people in life that are ready to give up for someone else more than for themselves? That's what a parent does. That's what a parent does. A parent gives up sleep. A parent gives up food. A parent gives up their own money, not because they want something in return, because this is my child and this is my responsibility. I have to do it. This is a piece of me. If my spouse starts acting like a child, if my spouse wakes me up in the middle of the night and starts crying like that, and my spouse throws the food on the floor, well, I'm sorry. We can't be together. I'm very sorry. This is going to break up, right? It's not going to work. How come you don't tell it to your child? Because you love your child more than you love yourself. My parent loves me more than I love myself. A spouse doesn't say that about the other spouse. We have to be ready to love our fellow Jew more than we love ourselves, than Moshe Rabbeinu. We can't suffice by the kamoicha. That's a Torah. Torah says that's an obligation. A parent doesn't do it out of obligation. A parent does it out of a visceral reaction. We have to love everyone the same way. So we take strength from the parsha this week of V'ata Tetzaveh, and we have to work on our commitment to our fellow Jew, to be there, to sacrifice for them, even if it means it's something that we would never do for ourselves. That's right. We would never do it for ourselves. We're going to be ready to do it for somebody else. Anyone have any questions? Anyone here or anyone online have any questions?